One night gone. The Springfield Three. It was a night of celebration in Springfield, Missouri. The summer of 1992 had just begun, and two teenage girls were returning home after their high school graduation parties. They were supposed to wake up the next morning for a trip to the water park. Their mother was already asleep in the quiet house on East Delmar Street. Everything seemed ordinary, safe, just another small-town evening. But by sunrise, all three women were gone. Their cars, purses, and personal belongings were left behind. The dog was still in the house, no signs of forced entry, no struggle. It was as if the three had simply vanished into thin air. For more than 30 years, the mystery of Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall has haunted Springfield. And still today, one chilling question remains. What happened to the Springfield Three? It was the summer of 1992 in Springfield, Missouri, a quiet Midwestern city known for its churches, family neighborhoods, and the kind of small-town calm that made people feel safe. June nights were warm, cicadas filled the air, and families left their doors unlocked, believing nothing truly bad could happen here. But on the night of June 6th, three women would vanish without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that still haunts Springfield more than 30 years later. This case would come to be known as the Springfield Three. June 6th was a day of joy for many Springfield families. Kickapoo High School had just held its graduation ceremony. Among the graduates was 18-year-old Stacy McCall, a cheerful and responsible young woman, and her close friend Suzie Streeter, also 18, known for her bright smile and outgoing personality. That evening, the girls joined dozens of classmates at different graduation parties across town. They laughed, took photos, and talked excitedly about their future plans. The energy of youth and the freedom of summer hung in the air. Suzie's mother, Sherrill Levitt, a 47-year-old single mom, stayed home that night. A hard-working cosmetologist, Sherrill was described by friends as reliable and caring, a woman who kept her household tidy and her loved ones close. What no one knew then was that this night of celebration was about to turn into Springfield's greatest nightmare. As the parties wound down, Stacy and Suzie began to reconsider their original plans. They had first intended to spend the night at another friend's house, but sometime around 2 a.m., the girls decided instead to head back to Suzie's home, where Sherrill was already asleep. It was the safer choice, closer to their own neighborhood, and they promised friends they'd meet again the next morning for a trip to a water park. The girls got into their car and drove through the quiet streets of Springfield, unaware that this short trip home would be the last time anyone saw them alive. On June 7th, friends expected to meet Stacy and Suzie for the water park outing. When the girls didn't show up, their friends grew worried. Calls went unanswered. By late morning, several friends drove over to the Levitt home. What they found inside would only deepen the mystery. All three women's cars were parked outside. Their purses, money, and personal items were inside the house. Sherrill's dog was restless but unharmed. There were no signs of forced entry. Everything looked normal, except for one chilling fact: the women were gone. Even more disturbing, one friend later reported hearing a strange message on the answering machine, a male voice that sounded angry. That message was accidentally erased before police could analyze it. Springfield in the early 1990s was the kind of city where neighbors waved to one another from porches and children rode bikes until dark without fear. It was a community built on routine and trust. Violent crime existed, but it felt far away, something that happened in larger cities, not here. For Sherrill Levitt, her modest home on East Delmar Street was her sanctuary. She worked long hours as a cosmetologist, supporting her daughter and keeping a close circle of friends. Sherrill was known for being neat, dependable, and a bit of a perfectionist. Her house always clean, her garden always tidy. She loved Suzie deeply and was proud of the independent young woman her daughter was becoming. 18-year-old Suzie Streeter was charismatic and strong-willed. Friends remembered her sense of humor and her ability to light up a room. She had recently broken up with her boyfriend and was looking ahead to college. Stacy McCall, also 18, was the opposite in many ways. Quieter, more reserved, the good girl type who rarely took risks. The two balanced each other perfectly, their friendship a mix of energy and calm. June 6th wasn't just another Saturday. For hundreds of Springfield families, it was a milestone, the night their children stepped into adulthood. The city buzzed with graduation parties, each house filled with laughter, music, and the chatter of excited teenagers. Stacy and Suzie attended several parties that evening. At each stop, they hugged friends, posed for pictures, and promised to stay in touch as life took them in new directions. Witnesses later recalled the girls being happy and carefree, making no mention of fear or unease. At one point, the girls considered spending the night at a friend's home after the parties. But as the evening stretched into early morning, they changed their minds. Suzie suggested going back to her house instead. It was familiar, comfortable, and her mother was there. Stacy agreed. After all, they had plans to meet friends the next morning for a trip to a water park. Going to Suzie's seemed like the sensible choice. Around 2 a.m., the two young women drove through Springfield's dimly lit streets. They likely chatted about the night, the photos taken, and the fun they'd had. When they pulled up to Sherrill's home, everything appeared calm. Porch lights glowed, the neighborhood was still. Inside, Sherrill had likely gone to bed. The house, small but tidy, gave no sign that anything unusual was about to happen. What happened next remains a mystery. But sometime between 2 a.m. and dawn, all three women disappeared. By late morning on June 7th, friends expected Stacy and Suzie to meet them for the water park outing. When they failed to arrive, calls were made to the Levitt house. No one answered. Worried, several friends decided to stop by. When they entered the house, they found a scene that was both ordinary and deeply unsettling. The cars belonging to Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy were all parked outside. The purses of the women sat neatly inside the house, with money and IDs still inside. The dog, Sherrill's beloved Yorkshire Terrier, was nervous but unharmed. The beds appeared to have been slept in, but the women were gone. No signs of forced entry were found anywhere in the house. It was as if the women had simply stepped outside and never returned. Adding to the unease, one of the friends recalled playing back a message on the answering machine. The voice was male, harsh, and unsettling. Before anyone could think twice, the message was accidentally erased, destroying what might have been a crucial clue. This detail would haunt investigators for years, representing one of the many what-ifs in the case. Eventually, Sherrill's friends and Suzie's classmates called police. At first, authorities treated the situation cautiously. Adults sometimes left on short trips. Teenagers sometimes stayed out all night. But as the hours passed and no sign of the three women appeared, concern grew into alarm. By the end of June 7th, it was clear. This was no ordinary disappearance. Something had happened inside that quiet home on East Delmar Street, and 3 lives had been swallowed whole. When police were finally called to the Levitt home, Valuable time had already slipped away. Friends, classmates, and even family members had been in and out of the house for hours. They had picked up the phone, cleaned up broken glass from a lamp outside, and unknowingly disturbed what could have been a crime scene. Detectives later admitted that the house had been compromised before they could even begin their investigation. Footprints, fingerprints, and potential DNA were likely lost forever. What should have been a sealed crime scene had instead become a revolving door. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, speaking with nearby residents. Most reported hearing nothing unusual that night. No screams, no break-ins, no suspicious cars. Springfield was the kind of town where people slept with windows open in summer. If something happened, no one seemed to notice. One neighbor did recall hearing a strange noise around 4 a.m., describing it as a bang or a car door slamming. But it was vague, impossible to tie directly to the disappearance. Another mentioned seeing an unfamiliar van parked near the house in the early morning hours, but details were fuzzy and no solid lead ever emerged. Inside, detectives cataloged what remained: 3 cars, 3 purses, 3 women missing. They noted that nothing appeared stolen. Jewelry, money, and valuables were untouched. The only sign of disturbance was that broken porch light globe in the driveway, swept away by well-meaning friends before investigators arrived. Some theorized it had shattered during a struggle, but without the evidence intact, it remained speculation. Most haunting of all was the small dog, restless but unharmed, pacing back and forth as if waiting for its owners to return. By the evening of June 7th, word of the disappearance spread quickly. Families gathered at the Levitt home, offering support but also flooding the property with more footsteps and fingerprints. The once quiet neighborhood became a hive of fear and rumors. The Springfield Police Department, unaccustomed to handling such a bizarre case, scrambled to piece together what they could. Detectives began interviewing friends, ex-boyfriends, co-workers, anyone who might hold a clue. But the first crucial 24 hours slipped away without answers. Local television stations broke the story the next day. 3 Springfield women missing without a trace. Anchors emphasized the chilling details: the unlocked house, the untouched purses, the complete lack of struggle. For a city unaccustomed to sensational crime, it was almost unthinkable. Viewers couldn't imagine how 3 people could vanish from their own home in the middle of the night without a sound. The mystery gripped Springfield, leaving residents double-checking their locks and fearing that whoever was responsible might still be out there. As night fell on June 7th, the reality began to sink in. Sherrill Levitt, her daughter Suzie Streeter, and their friend Stacy McCall were not coming home. There were no ransom calls, no notes, no sightings, just silence. The Springfield Three had vanished, leaving behind only questions and a house full of unanswered clues. By the afternoon of June 7th, panic had already taken root. Stacy's mother, Janice McCall, was frantic. Stacy was the dependable daughter, the one who always called if she was going to be late. For Janice, silence was unthinkable. She drove back and forth from the Levitt home, calling hospitals, friends, anyone who might have seen the girls. Janice would later say that from the very first moment she knew, something was terribly wrong. Stacy would never just disappear, she insisted. That conviction would keep her fighting for answers for decades to come. For Sherrill's friends and clients, the disappearance was equally shocking. Sherrill was reliable to a fault. She wouldn't walk away from her work, her home, or her daughter. To those who knew her, the idea that she had simply left voluntarily was impossible. When Springfield police finally addressed the media, their words gave little comfort. Investigators admitted they had no evidence of foul play, but also no explanation for the missing women. They confirmed the unusual details: 3 cars, 3 purses, no forced entry. The public was left to interpret the silence. Had the women stepped out briefly and been ambushed? Were they lured away by someone they trusted? Or had something far darker taken place within the walls of the Levitt home? Within days, the case consumed Springfield. Volunteers printed missing posters with the faces of Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy. They were taped to telephone poles, handed out at grocery stores, pinned to bulletin boards at local churches. Prayer vigils were held, candles flickering as neighbors begged for the women's safe return. Fear seeped into daily life. Parents kept closer watch on their children. Women avoided being alone at night. Springfield, once so ordinary and safe, was suddenly a city on edge. Local reporters compared the case to something out of a crime novel, except this was real, and the missing were mothers, daughters, and friends. Despite the public outcry, detectives admitted they were struggling. No ransom note, no phone calls, no trace of the women leaving voluntarily. The only clue, the erased answering machine message, was gone forever. Time was not on their side. Every day that passed meant fewer chances of finding the Springfield Three alive. And already, the most critical window for solving a disappearance, the first 48 hours, was closing. By the end of that first week, Springfield was holding its breath. Police had no suspects, families had no answers, and a quiet suburban house had become the epicenter of one of America's most haunting mysteries. 3 women, gone without struggle, without trace, without reason. The case was no longer just about one family's tragedy. It was about an entire community shaken to its core, living in fear of the unknown. And the haunting question remained: how can 3 women vanish from their own home and leave nothing behind? Every secret waits to be revealed. Every silence that carries an echo, every story is waiting to be told. This was her secret. What about yours? What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice matters. Subscribe and step into the echoes of truth.